told them, I said, look, we're in the middle of the biggest natural disaster in the history of this country. And there are people whose lives are dependent on you right now. And you gotta be heroes. And they were.
He just captured the look I had on my face because I knew people were gonna die in their homes. I knew people were gonna try to go to the attic. I knew people were gonna drown. And that happened.
It was like we lived in St. Bernard, a great place to live, and half hour later, there was no more St. Bernard. It was gone. What we knew as St. Bernard was history.
And I can remember looking out of the window at Chalmette High School, looking down Judge Perez and seeing a wall of water just coming down Judge Perez with fierce intensity.
It was like a war zone. And everything was so gray, total destruction everywhere. There was just absolutely no life, no birds, no mosquitoes.
Where's all the different people coming to help us? And you realize that we were ground zero. Nobody could come in here and help us. We were kind of on our own to take care of ourselves.
Whatever plan there was did not anticipate an event the size of Katrina. And now, as far as I'm concerned, it was the worst case scenario for this parish. Maybe it wasn't for others, but for this, it couldn't have gotten any worse.
In 2005, St. Bernard was really a great place to live.
Life was good. It was predictable. Population was nearing 70,000 then. It was a very homogeneous community. Everyone knew everyone else in the neighborhoods. There was a strong neighborhood watch program. People watched out for themselves, for each other.
Me personally, I had my two sons were living here, my parents, my siblings. Everybody lived in St. Bernard. We had aunts, uncles, cousins. This was a community where you grew up, but everybody stayed.
I was teaching at Chalmette High School, and actually we had just started school. It was in August, and my youngest daughter was in school at St. Robert's, getting ready to go to high school, and my other two were in college at Nichols. And we had, our population was around 68 to 70,000. Traffic was pretty congested at that time. But it was a great community, great education, kind of like it is today.
I had just been named superintendent in August of 2004. So I had been the superintendent for only a year. My focus was on increasing academic achievement.
Life was nice. I thought we had a great parish. I was the fire chief in 2005, and I have been since 1990. And I really enjoyed St. Bernard Parish, enjoyed my life. My children grew up here. I pretty much grew up here. I think everything was going really well, and up until, August 29th. And everything changed so quickly.
Hurricane Katrina has made landfall now on the southern Louisiana coast, just east of Grand Isle, Louisiana.
Let's go ahead and give you the particulars here.
As the superintendent, I'm a member of the parish emergency preparedness team. So it was that Friday afternoon, I guess about 3 o'clock, must have been August 26th. I was sitting at my desk. We were going to have a football jamboree that night at Chalmette High School that I was going to attend. And I got a call from parish government saying that we were convening an OEP meeting. And I said, for what? And they said, well, there is the hurricane in the Gulf.
That Friday night was a shocker, seeing this big storm all of a sudden in the Gulf, and it was coming our way. And you don't really believe it. As Saturday progressed, people figured they probably need to get out. This is a big storm. I wasn't leaving. I was going to stay home, and I was going to be the man of the house, right, and stay back. And that's what we did. And there was a point in time during this whole storm, and I said, man, that was a mistake.
I am this morning declaring that we will be doing a mandatory evacuation, and I'm going to read the evacuation order to the public. Whereas the National Weather Service...
I live in Shell Beach, and my wife and I, my two sons, were down there on a Sunday morning, basically just picking a few things up. And I guess about 8:30 in the morning, my cell phone, and it rang, and then it was an official with the National Hurricane Center in Miami, and he said, "Sheriff, I'm sorry to have to make this call, but I couldn't sleep last night. I just wanted to let you know that you're going to have a 30-foot wall of water hit your parish, that you're going to flood levee to levee. There's not going to be a structured SPAD, and you're going to have significant loss of life. God bless you and good luck," and he hung the phone up. So my wife said, "Who was that?" And I said, "That was a guy that said, take the pictures off the wall and pack the insurance papers, because this is the last time you're going to see this place."
Right before Katrina, Junior was in the hospital for 2 weeks with illnesses that he had with his stomach. And he had had exploratory surgery, and he had returned home the day of the storm. As soon as he got home, I had to bring him back to the government complex. When we left home, he looked at me and he says, "Honey, look around at everything, because you're not going to see it as it looks today." And I said, "Oh, we're going to come back home tonight." And he says, "No," he says, "I don't think so."
Well, I think then that Sunday morning, the decision was made to open Chalmette High School as a shelter of last resort, and actually St. Bernard High as well at that time. So we got a team of people together. We provided school buses for the parish to evacuate as many people who wanted to leave. So I think one of the good things that happened in St. Bernard that Sunday morning was that anyone who wanted to leave the parish and evacuate, they were able to do so, because we did provide that transportation.
We basically evacuated the most people in any parish in the state of Louisiana in the history of the state of Louisiana. We had 68,000 people, and after the storm we calculated we had only about 8,000 residents stayed. So that meant we evacuated about 60,000 people, and thank God they heeded and left.
The biggest thing that I remember was trying to get the people from St. Rita's on the phone, because when we were around 10 o'clock the day before the hurricane, it was the last time people could leave, was around noon. We were getting buses to go out of Kmart parking lot, and so they had drivers and buses, and they said, "Did everybody leave?" I said, "Well, St. Rita's didn't leave." And they said, "Well, call St. Rita's." So I called St. Rita's up, and I said, "Mabel," I said, we have 3 buses here with drivers. Do you want the buses or not?" And she sat there and she said, "Well, I met with most of the families, and they said it's okay to stay. We've got some pumps, we got some nurses, and we're going to stay." So and then she kind of went, "Well, are they mad?" meaning the council. And I said, "Well, it doesn't matter." I said, "You have a hurricane evacuation plan and you're not following it." I said, "Do you want the buses or not?" And she goes, "No, I don't want the buses."
We opened Chalmette High School probably around noon that Sunday. And that Sunday evening, we had about, I'd say, 250 people or so. We had some of our citizens who were elderly, who were very ill. And we had to accommodate and help those people with actually no medical help whatsoever. We were just school people. We had people on ventilators to breathe, and we had many, many individuals who needed intensive medical attention and care. So that Sunday evening, as the storm intensified and headed our way, when it hit, we looked across the street and saw the rooftop of Lacoste Elementary totally torn off. There were shattered windows in our building. You could feel the intensity, and we cared for the people overnight. We actually thought early into Monday morning that we were past the worst of it. We had weathered that particular part of the storm. We felt pretty good.
Because remember, it was a bluebird day on that morning. My brother and I actually was walking. We had left the school. We were on the neutral ground walking toward Miro to go check on our homes. And we just heard this big boom and didn't really know what that was. And we looked back toward Araby, back toward Parish Road, and we just saw this big white wall of something. We really didn't know what it was. And then we saw the water coming from the lake, or from the 40 Alpin side, and just coming down Veronica, cars and garbage cans. So we ran back to the gym, and if there was any point in time that we thought it was a mistake, that was the time. And then the phone calls from friends and family about what was happening, that you just couldn't describe it.
When the wind shifted, I kind of thought that we might have dodged a bullet, and then we started getting reports of water. And I remember going downstairs with Heath Allen and Tom Fitzgerald and some of our guys, because we had boats stationed here, and seeing the whitecaps rolling in from Araby, and it was like, oh, this is going to be bad. And it was unbelievable, because we had school buses in the parking lot, military vehicles, there was some kind of rider van, and the next thing you know, you couldn't even see the rooftops of them. The water had covered them completely.
The water was getting real high, and diapers was floating by from Walmart and etc. Just a real rush of water.
The water didn't get here till about 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. We sort of thought we had been saved through this storm. It was actually on the radio that I got a phone call from Sheriff Stevens to me on the radio that he had given me that water was coming up. And he tells me the water is coming up 3-4 feet, and I assumed he meant on Judge Perez, but it was actually on St. Bernard Highway, which meant our parish would be totally inundated with water. And from that point on, this was just pandemonium. It was unbelievable what we were seeing.
I can remember looking out of the window at Chalmette High School, looking down Judge Perez and seeing a wall of water just coming down Judge Perez with fierce intensity. So we had to very quickly take those maybe 200, 250 people that we started with, many of whom were ill and infirm, and carry them upstairs, many of them. Those who could not walk, we had people in wheelchairs, we had people, as I said, on ventilators. We got them upstairs as the water just surged in, and we were not able to move all of our provisions upstairs. So the water just broke down the walls and the coolers in our cafeteria on the first floor. We lost just about all of our provisions.
At the sheriff's office, which was located, of course, right behind the courthouse, and we stayed there that night, along with most of the key members of the sheriff's office. And I guess about 7:30 the next day was when the levees broke and the chaos started, and wind was still blowing 50 or 60 miles an hour. Water rushed in the lobby of the courthouse like Niagara Falls.
When the water started coming up, all the deputies were there, approximately maybe 74, 75 deputies and some other people. And we didn't know how high the water was coming in. It reached the third step of the stairwell into the courthouse. And the clerk of court's office, the downstairs was totally flooded. We had about 6 feet of water outside the courthouse. Because Mr. Raleigh always stated that the courthouse is on the same level as the levee, 18 feet, above sea level. He said, even with the levee. He says, if we get water over the levee, you're gonna have water in this courthouse. And he always did say, the day when water comes in this courthouse, all the other houses will be underwater up to the roofs.
Can you imagine standing on the roof of this building and looking down and seeing 15 feet of water with people in boats looking at you on the roof of the building and thinking, this is where I live, this is where I raise my family, this is where I have my business, this is where I want to be, and there's nothing but water everywhere.
I was sleeping in the ICU and water dripped on me and woke me up, and I asked one of the nurses, well, how many patients do you have? She goes, 50. I said, 50? So I got up and started making rounds. So I'm making rounds, and as I'm making rounds, about 9:30, I see water coming into the parking lot. And within 45 minutes, the water was 6 feet deep. And then it just started going up a foot an hour to 13 feet. And people asked me one time, were you nervous? And I said, well, actually, I'm on the Red Cross. And I had a guy come in, an engineer, and he told me, Chalmette is a bowl. He said, if your levees break, you can have 13 feet of water across this parish. And sure enough, when 13 feet was reached, it stopped.
As the water settled and leveled off to, I'd say, about 8 to 10 feet outside of the window, because it had come up to the second floor, then the boats started coming to us. People were coming by boat. We were pulling them in through the windows of the second floor at Chalmette High School. And our numbers swelled to between 12 and 1,500. We just lost count. And people were coming in with a few of their possessions, their pets, and we were just hauling them in through that second floor.
There was just stunned silence. I mean, we had, the district attorney was there, the district court judges stayed in their chambers. And people were lined up on the balcony, and she said, you got to say something. And I told them, I said, look, we're in the middle of the biggest natural disaster in the history of this country. And there are people whose lives are dependent on you right now. And you got to be heroes. And they were. They were courageous.
The nurses were tremendous. They were troopers. I mean, as they're seeing the patients and taking care of the patients, the electricity's out, it's hot, the oxygen goes off, the suctions go off. They're trying to do everything they can for the patients. The irony is we have these hurricane windows and we have to bust these windows out. We're taking oxygen tanks and beating on the windows and beating, and then you crack it and finally bust a hole big enough to let a little bit of air in. And as we're doing that, people are coming with boats up to the second floor, and we're bringing them over the railing of the second floor, and about 100 people end up in our hallways.
The heat was intense. We had, where we put the sickest of the individuals was in our upstairs, what we called our presentation room upstairs. It was a larger room. We made them as comfortable as possible, but we then took and broke these double-paned windows in there to get some ventilation through those windows.
Things that were going on at the gym at Chalmette High School, with people bringing people hanging off of roofs, and they're picking them up in boats and they're dropping them off at the ramp at the school. So there was a friend of mine. He brought his mother there, and his mother died, drowned. He couldn't get her in a boat, and she was laying in a boat, and he just kept going back and forth. He knew she was dead, couldn't save her, but he kept going back and saving his neighbors, and to watch the end, and pulling up, and the firefighters taking his mom out and all that. It was, as horrific as people can explain the things that were going on, it was double that.
The people that were left at Chalmette Hospital were obviously the people that were too sick or too compromised to try to move or evacuate. When we finally managed to move those people, we got them to the parish jail when the water went down. They set up a triage center there. And I remember the first day I rode over there, it almost sounded like there was some equipment running in the jail, and I knew there was nothing running. And it was a collective moan of the people that they had laid out in the hall there, basically shoulder to shoulder, and trying to treat. And it was, I don't know, human suffering was something to watch then.
I knew people were going to die. And Heath Allen was interviewing me. We were out in the atrium looking at the water rising. And he just captured the look I had on my face, because I knew people were going to die in their homes. I knew people were going to try to go to the attic. I knew people were going to drown. And that happened.
One of the deputies told me that he was riding, I can't remember where it was, maybe down to Lambert on one of the streets, and he heard some people yelling, and it was odd because they had punched a hole, a vent out the attic, you know, and they were in the attic. And the odd thing is that they were yelling, but they were looking in the opposite direction. And it turned out that both of these people were blind, but they had 2 young kids. And so the deputy put the kids on the Sea-Doo, and brought them back to the courthouse, and then went back, and the parents were gone, they drowned. It was a difficult day.
That night I was sleeping on the roof, and I'm laying down on the roof, and I didn't have a pillow or anything, and it's gravel, and I just kind of lay down like this and put my hands down, and as I'm looking out, Village Square is on fire, and I look over here, and the pumping station's going, and the stars were beautiful. I mean, but then someone came and told me about St. Rita's, and the 35 patients that had died, and most of those patients were mine. So it was a very difficult night.
There were people clinging to life on rooftops and stuck in attics, and I mean, that's no exaggeration. There were hundreds of them. And the deputies and the firefighters swung into action. Fortunately, we live in a coastal community, and many of them were familiar with operating boats under, you know, difficult situations. So we had a gang of Sea-Doos in the back lot, and there were things that were happening that were just so fast that we were actually, they had deputies, about 8 or 10 deputies assigned to Sea-Doos that would go out and bring 2 or 3 people at a time.
The rescue of people were brought to the courthouse, and we put them in a large courtroom, and we had over hundreds of people in that courtroom. And I believe 2 of them passed away at that time in the courthouse during transportation due to the stress of the storm. But everybody went to the courthouse on the 2nd floor, and then when the time came, we moved them to the ferry or to the St. Bernard port, where they went off on boards across the river somewhere.
We would communicate and we would plan all night long, and then we would get about 3 hours sleep, and as soon as sunup would come, all the boats would go out again, and the firefighters rescued thousands of people. Along with citizens and the sheriff's department. It was amazing.
If you're a student of human nature, Katrina was worth a PhD. I have to be honest and tell you, there was no one that I expected to perform that didn't do a good job. The surprise was the people that you didn't expect, that were heroes, that were extraordinary. And you thought, where did this come from, right? And it was an incredible, it was an incredible scene.
When you're in those crisis situations, sometimes you're working as a team. You have our leadership there. If you do remain calm and you show that you know what you're doing, the best of you comes out, the best of the team around you comes out. And then you can kind of breathe a little bit after that crisis is over. But that's when you see what people are truly made of.
I don't think anybody can really envision what was here unless you were here. You can hear the second-hand accounts, the first-hand accounts, but unless you actually live through it, you really can't understand how quickly the water came up, how devastating the water was, and just how horrific the situation had become within minutes. It was like we lived in St. Bernard, a great place to live, and half hour later, there was no more St. Bernard. It was gone. What we knew as St. Bernard was history, and that's where we had to start from there, from nothing.
Whatever day that was that they opened the parish back up, we came back, and it was like a war zone. And everything was so gray, you know, it was just mud everywhere. There was just absolutely no life, you know, no birds, no mosquitoes. You know, we're in August, September. It was just the weirdest thing. You know, you didn't see anything running around. It was weird and surreal.
We saw some different things. We saw deer on top of roofs. We saw alligators on roofs. I mean, it was just unbelievable, the things we saw. You had cars that floated up on roofs. You had slab houses that floated away from where they were to the middle of the street. Not a house that was on pillars that was wood frame that could float like many of them did in St. Claude Heights and Araby and that area. But this was a slab house, popped out the ground and floated. Cement slab, unbelievable.
I killed about 4 moccasins. We and the people, when we were cleaning the mud up, had about 30 snakes in our house. The mud in the house was probably a foot deep. When you stepped into it, it had that sulfur smell, and you just couldn't smell anything, and it's a horrible smell. It's a smell that you never forget. You just don't want to see it again.
I was there. You know, you had your white suits and all of that stuff, gloves on. And my wife called me, and you know, Lori calls and says, look, can you check and see if my mother's ring is on the window pane in the kitchen? And she couldn't understand that the house was underwater. All of the cabinets and the ceiling in the kitchen are laying now on top of all of our lawn furniture that I put in the kitchen. And she just, you know, no, go check the window pane, go check the window. I couldn't get to it, and I couldn't get to it. So, you know, I go around outside, and her mother's room. It was sitting there on the window pane on the inside. It was sitting there, and it's a little angel hand with wings, and it's a little angel hand, and her ring was sitting on it. That's where she would put it when she did the dishes. It was sitting there, and total destruction everywhere. All the things that she had on them, when it was gone, except for that mother's ring.
One day we were riding around in one of the subdivisions in Araby, and a reporter was with me from Network, and there was this elderly lady whose family I knew, and it was just such a sad thing. She was sitting, the only thing that was left was those concrete steps that led up to the house. The house was gone, it was just a slab. And the other thing was she had a statue of Mary that was just freestanding on a little bitty slab right in front of the steps. I mean, it would be something, if a photographer could have caught this, it would have probably won an award. And she was there with her head in her hands. And so I stopped and talked to her, and she was weepy. You know, I mean, it wasn't in full-blown tears or anything. She says, you know, I said, no, my husband's dead. You know, he died. My husband had died 3 or 4 years before Katrina. She said, I've got 3 kids. They all live out of state. And she says, basically, I'm here alone. He says, but you know the most painful thing is, he says, there's no proof that I ever existed. I said, well, how's that? He says, well, all the family pictures and the marriage licenses and the birth certificates and the high school diplomas And all of the things that were important to me that proved I was here are gone. They were in my house. So she says, literally, there's no evidence that I ever survived, that I ever did anything, that my husband and I were here, that I raised my kids here. Everything is gone. I'm telling you, it was just so depressing because you know what? She was so right.
People started popping up in campers and along the highway, and people started little by little moving all of their debris from their homes to the streets, and the mounds of debris and trucks coming by and picking them up. And I worked that, you know, a little bit with some people, and you know, it was just it was kind of weird, you know, seeing, you know, people's stuff, clothes and pictures, just being picked up and put in. There was something wrong about that. You know, it just didn't feel like you were cleaning anything up. It was just, you know, it just didn't feel well. You know, I didn't feel good about doing it, you know.
When somebody asked me, though, newspaper people kept coming and coming. What was it like? I mean, what was it like? I said, well, it's like when you go outside and you go to start your lawnmower and it doesn't start. And somebody stole your car, and your house burned down, and your business went bankrupt, and all your friends died or moved away on the same day. I said, not one aspect of your life was left intact. And that brought to me, I'd always thought about the scenario of two certain things in life, death and taxes. And now I add change. And I said, now God gives all of us these things as temporary gifts in our life. And if we don't appreciate Him, He takes them back. And I said, in Katrina's case, sometimes He takes them all back in one day.
It was almost impossible to believe that we could recover. We could not find more than 5 or 6 places in St. Bernard Parish that wasn't inundated with flood waters. Everything was devastated. So with that in mind, council members, parish president, sheriff, fire chief, all of the folks who were here in this parish were just looking at each other and saying, how do we recover? But I would say it was at that point we said, we will recover.
I looked around at the devastation. I tell you, I don't even know how to explain it. Part of me said, my God, how can we come back from this? What can we do? And there were people here in the community who were adamant, we're coming back, we're going to rebuild. So I can remember having a meeting in the open air and a pledge that I made. I said, the first student, the first child who steps foot back in this parish, we will provide educational opportunities for them. So 11 weeks after the storm, we were the first to open anywhere in the metro area. And we procured classroom trailers from North and South Carolina and Georgia. We had them shipped down. We put them together in the parking lot of Chalmette High School, and we did that. So we set that up, and 11 weeks after the storm, we opened. And the first day, we had 334 kids, which was astounding. 15 years later now, we have over 7,800 students.
I remember driving around the parish, and when you'd see a restaurant open or a store open, that was like therapy. You know, I remember seeing the first FEMA trailers delivered in people's front yards, and that was therapy.
I think the first fast food restaurant, which wasn't a fast food restaurant, was Today's Catch. And when they opened, it was like we couldn't believe we had real food for a change instead of MRIs or MREs, whatever they call them. They weren't that great, but when you're hungry, I guess it's better than nothing. But I want to thank Jeff and Terry Pullman. They cleaned up their place, they came back quickly, they started serving food, and the lines were like down the street because everybody wanted to eat something good.
My goal was to rebuild medicine in St. Bernard Parish. My wife and I sat and said, well, what do we do? I mean, I could retire. I didn't have to come back and work. I for sure could have gone to the North Shore like a whole bunch of doctors. I said, but you know what? I said, St. Bernard put my kids through school. They gave me the money to retire. They allowed me to practice my skills for now 40 years. I said, where are we most needed? and we said we're most needed here. So we became dedicated to rebuilding our house. We stayed in a trailer in Torres Park for about a year and a half. We helped get the funds to build the different facilities, you know, the triple trailer, the 20,000 square foot, the hospital and the office building. We helped recruit and keep doctors and supply people for the patients to see them. So to rebuild medicine was our priority. I would not wear my white coat until medicine was normal again in St. Bernard Parish. And the day that the hospital opened, one of my special moments was that the Archbishop put the coat on me again when the hospital opened. So that was a special moment.
They said if the schools came and we got a hospital and people would come, and they have, you know, and that's been great. And, but I think you're well protected here, because if you call for a police or a firefighter or EMS unit, they come. You know, if you want your kids to go to a good school, they're here. If you want your kids to do an activity like recreational sports, they're here. Valerie's facility, oh my goodness, that is great. You know, whoever thought we'd have a Holiday Inn Express and a Quality Inn like that? And that's great, because it brings people into our community.
There's just no better place to live. It's safe here, the tax base is friendly, the public services offered are good, the levee protection is first class now. So you can live down here and work in the central business district, to be at work in 15 minutes. You know, it provides the same thing that historically it always has. A safe, comfortable, economic place to live and still have access to everything that this entire region enjoys.
I don't think there's a place on earth that has more intestinal fortitude than the people of St. Bernard Parish. Everybody wanted to come back. We became the fastest growing community in America for about 3 or 4 years because of our folks determined to come back home. When you start at zero and you get up to where we are today, around 60,000, you have to have a lot of self-determination and a lot of want. And our people wanted to come home because this is home.
St. Bernard is St. Bernard. And there is enough of us who stood around and are still here, that way of life and culture will be around forever. I truly believe that.
What has happened down here is the winds have changed. The clouds rolled in from the north and it started to rain. Rained real hard and it rained for a long, long time. And now there's 6 feet of water in the streets of Evangeline. River rolls all day, the river rolls all night. Some people got lost in the flood, and some people got away all right. But the river done busted through, clear on down by Plaquemine. They got 6 feet of water in the streets of Evangeline. Louisiana, Louisiana, they're trying to wash us away. They're trying to wash us away. Louisiana, Louisiana, they're trying to wash us away. They're trying to wash us away. President Coolidge came down on the railroad train. with a little fat man with a notepad in his hand. And the president said, hey, little fat man, ain't this a shame? What the river has done to this poor cracker's land. Louisiana, Louisiana, they're trying to wash us away. They're trying to wash us away. Oh, Louisiana, Louisiana, they're trying to wash us away. They're trying to wash us away. Y'all. Louisiana, Louisiana, they're trying to wash us away. They're trying to wash us away. Oh, Louisiana, Louisiana, they're trying to wash us away. They're trying to wash us away. They're trying to wash us away. They're trying to wash us away.